Chapter 5. I was a good student despite the raven's cruelty. I looked at it as a game and practiced harder at reading and writing and arithmetic than any other girl in my class. Not only did I enjoy proving my teacher wrong, but I figured I had to learn as much as I could that year because I planned to leave on the North Star with my parents the next summer and never return. While my schoolmates played cards and made dolls during their recreation time, I chose to read. I started with the simple readers we were given, tracing my fingers over the words again and again, trying to sound them out and decipher what they meant. But by spring, I was reading books like the ones Rosie had. I bided my time and waited to escape the raven. When the first boats began to appear, I could hardly believe the time had come. It would not be long before my parents arrived. However, on one of the boats was a letter from my father. The North Star, along with the other schooners, had not made it home to Banks Island the summer before. They had been stranded on a smaller island by an early freeze. The hunting and trapping had not been as successful there, and the entire group had to decide to do their trading in Toyatuck instead of coming all the way to Aklavik for fear of being caught by the ice again. I was devastated. This could not be happening. By now, I could read and know my times tables as well as Catherine, and I was ready to go home. It was time, and my parents were not going to come for me. Not sure if they would ever come for me, I cried until the letter was soaked with tears. It tore my hand. That night, I had a nightmare. I dreamed I was locked beneath the raven's habit with many other children. She cackled and laughed as we tried to break free, straining against its weight, knowing that we would never see our parents again. Outside, men competed in athletics and women gossiped, and everyone sang and danced and shared the stories of our ancestors, while I delivered meals to the sick patients in the hospital. It did not take me long to discover that being a nurse was not the glamorous job I had imagined. I would have given anything to be with my people, eating dry meat and muktuk, delicious tiny cubes of whale blubber and skin. If I could not go home, or even to the games, the least the nuns could do was continue to teach me, but of course they did not. While I was not the only child who did not go home that summer, I was lonely without Agnes. She was able to return home to her family as they were now living in Tuktoyaktuk. But the nuns did their very best not to return any of us. Keeping us at the school was an easy way to ensure that we would return each fall, which was important to them. It wasn't just the chores. They were paid by the government per student, and plucking us from our homes and keeping us in their nests was a money-making business. My summer schedule provided little time even for reading, and I was happy to have regular classes begin again in the fall. The Raven was nearly bearable in comparison with the long hours of chores and hospital work. But when the wind turned cold again in October, the whole of the North seemed to come down with a sickness called smallpox, and the hospital filled to capacity. Our classes were halted once again, just weeks after they had resumed. Into November, as the hours of darkness lengthened day by day, we worked around the clock with the nuns and the men who were hired to do the chores we children could not do. We were instructed to call these men brothers, but they were far from being family. I was pretty sure that some did not even believe in God. I was no stranger to hard work. Life in the North required it, but I really disliked working in the hospital. The trappers were ill-tempered, and the sick women cried for their babies. Caring for them required so much of us that I longed for the return of the midnight sun to light the pages of my book, because I could only find a moment's peace to read very late in the evening. As it was, I held fairy tales and adventures to the window, desperate for escape, squinting in the darkness to catch the aquamarine glow of the northern lights. Many of my classmates fell ill eventually, tiny blistering sores rising on their skin and covering them with the same pox we had seen on the patients we attended. I no longer complained of the work. At least I did not have smallpox. As I watched several of the other children fall under the torment of the disease, I forgot both my exhaustion and my desire to read, and worked hard to do what was necessary. I had been emptying bedpans and basins of dirty cleaning water for many hours one day when my bladder started to hurt. I needed to hurry, but each time I made for the door, the raven gave me another job to do. I pressed my bare knees together and shuffled from bed to bed, trying to ease the feverish patients. If only the pain would disappear or the raven would go away. My bladder grew heavier and heavier. I crossed my legs and tried not to think about it. Just when I thought my whole tummy would burst, I noticed that the raven was busy chastising Catherine. I would have laughed out loud if it had not meant I would pee myself. This was my chance, and I ran through the door. The hallway was like the tundra. It went on forever. No matter how far I traveled, I never seemed to get anywhere. I was just one step from the doorway when from out of nowhere appeared two hungry eyes, like those of an owl. They leveled themselves to the height of my nose. The mouth beneath them opened, bearing fishy yellow teeth, and instead of letting out an owly hoo, the mouth growled. I felt something warm run down my legs as the brother ran off laughing. Before I could make it back to my room to clean myself up, the coarse voice of the raven called after me. Her heels clicked and scraped against the floor as she came closer. There was no escape. "You are a filthy child," she said when she saw what I had done. I told her about the brother, but she accused me of lying. To educate me, she left me shivering on the front lawn with a bucket of hot soapy water. I didn't need to look up to know that the other girls would be looking through the window and laughing while I washed out my canvas bloomers. As people became well again in late November, classes resumed. By then, I had read Alice's Adventures in Wonderland 4 times. Rosie had been telling the truth. Alice had not been hunting the rabbit at all. I would have brought its pelt back for my father. One day, the raven entered the classroom and told us that we would write letters home to our parents. I could hardly restrain myself in my seat. Not only did I long to make my father proud by telling him all that I had learned and about all the books I had read, but I wanted to ask him to come for me the next time the sun returned to melt the ice. We dipped our pens in inkwells and wrote "Dear Mother and Father" as instructed. For most of the students, the exercise was almost pointless. Many of their parents were unable to read English, just as my mother could not. Next, we were told to write, "I love it here at the school. The nuns have been very kind to us." Kind? That was a stretch. Instead, I wrote, "Dear Mother and Father, I hate this school. You were right. The food is awful and the nuns are very mean. They won't even let me wear the stockings you bought for me. As you can see, I have already learned to read and write. Please come get me as soon as you can. I am ready to go home. Love, Illumin." I did not hear the rest of what the raven dictated, but it didn't matter. I had written everything that I needed to say. I passed my letter to the front with the others. Now all I had to do was wait, or so I thought. 2 days later, the raven called me to her desk. "This is not what you were told to write," she said, tearing my letter in half and throwing it in the trash can. "Now write it again so it reads like this." She handed me a slip of paper to copy from. The other children were dismissed to go and play in the recreation room, but I was held back to write my letter. I stared at the ceiling and imagined I was bundled in hides, safe in my father's dog sled, whizzing through a snowy valley of white. I counted the stars and watched the northern lights dance, frost clinging to my nostrils. Sister McQuillan glimpsed me through the door as she floated by. She stopped, stepped into the room, and looked over my shoulder. "It's all right, Margaret," she said. "You may go to dinner now." The raven scowled at me when I handed in my letter. All I had written was "Dear Mother and Father." She would have held me there all night had it not been for Sister McQuillan, but it would not have mattered. Nothing could make me write that I loved the school. I found a seat next to Agnes in the refectory. "What's wrong?" she asked. "The Raven won't let me send a letter to my parents asking them to come and get me." "Don't worry. I overheard two nuns talking today. Next week, we're going over to CHAC to broadcast a message to our parents. You can tell them then." CHAC was a new radio station that had been established in the North not long before I started school. My parents loved it. They would be listening. The following week, we were marched over to a small wooden building in the middle of town and lined up outside in the dark. My knees nearly froze solid in the frigid winter air. Christmas was less than 3 weeks away. The nuns were crazy to make us children stand outside. I had practiced and practiced what I intended to say, but when I stepped inside the warm building, I was handed a piece of paper with writing on it. "Hello, Mom. Hello, Dad," it read. "Merry Christmas. I miss you, but the nuns treat us like family, and school is very fun." I did not know what the nuns thought they were going to accomplish with these messages home. The false praise of the school would be lost on the many non-English speaking parents. "And if you do not say what you are told to, we will cut the transmission," the Raven informed me. "Is that clear?" I should have known. Why would this message be any different? I stood in front of the microphone. "Mother, Father, get me out of here. Please take me home. I'm freezing, and my teacher is wicked and mean," I thought. But I said nothing, not one word. I never stopped talking at home. My silence would surely tell them something was wrong.